Hello. Welcome to Cliniversity. Hello. Welcome to Cliniversity.
So let us see the overview of a clinical research first, and then we can connect the medical writing to the clinical research. Okay. So moving on to the first slide, what is clinical research? Clinical research is a scientific study that involves people. Individual volunteer to participate in carefully conducted studies, which ultimately uncover improved methods and knowledge on screening, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of the disease and on the promotion of health and healthcare. Clinical research can be interventional or observational. Observational studies are the projects where there is no investigational product assigned to participants. Okay, so here we can see what is clinical research. Okay, so clinical research is the one where if you are involving a human subject, then only it is called as a clinical research. If you're not working on the human beings, it is not at all called as clinical research. If you are involving human beings only, then it is called as a clinical research. So before doing a clinical research, we would have been performed the preclinical studies. What is preclinical studies? So where you will be doing an in vitro study and in vivo study. That means a laboratory testing of a molecule, and in laboratory testing, if you found a drug is very efficient and safer, then you will check on the human animals, which is an in vivo. And then also if it is being efficient and safer, then you will apply for IND, asking the permission for conducting the clinical trial, and then you're going to work it on a human being. So here we have to recruit the participants because the clinical research, I hope you all had a good knowledge on the clinical research. So in the clinical research, we'll be doing a study on the human beings for a long period of time, and we need a lot more individuals to participate. So it's practically impossible to recruit some hundreds to some thousands of people and giving them the salary or some financial benefits and getting them into the clinical trial. That is practically impossible. So we can't give them the financial benefits. So what they need to do, they have to voluntarily participate. So without expecting anything, they had to voluntarily participate. So for that, we'll be providing an informed consent form, which includes how you're going to conduct the research and what should be the individual's participation in it. And after reading the entire informed consent form, and if they're readily participating, if they want to really participate in the clinical trial voluntarily, they'll be signing the informed consent form, and we are going to recruit them into the clinical research. If not, if they don't want to participate, they won't sign only. And there are some other cases also. Once they sign in the informed consent form, after a couple of days or in the very first day, they'll say like, no, we don't want to participate in the clinical trial. Then also we can't forcefully hold them into the clinical trial. So if you are doing a clinical research, the main thing that we need to focus is the patient safety. Okay, so all the patient's rights has to be safeguarded. We can't treat a patient like an animal. We can't forcefully hold them into the clinical trial. So we have to follow that research ethics followed on Declaration of Helsinki, and we have to use the human being who is really involved into the clinical trial based on the different phases of the clinical trial. And you're going to perform the clinical research and check this particular drug, how it is acting on the human being and how the human being is reacting to the drug. So with the answers that we got the safety answers and efficacy answers and the dosage answers, quality, all the answers. So with the answers that we got, we are trying to screen the disease, or we are going to diagnose the disease, we are going to treat the disease, or we are going to prevent the disease. Our final motto is to improve the healthcare. Okay, so this is what the clinical research is basically, and I hope you already learned about the clinical research, but it's very important to remember the basic points of the clinical research. And this clinical research has been divided into two types. Okay, one is interventional and the second one is observational. So always decode your subject into a natural language. So interventional, what do you mean by interventional? If someone is coming in between, if they are intervening in between, we'll be using a word called don't intervene in between. That means some other particle or some other device or some other treatment is coming in between, That means we are using a test treatment, or we are using some device, or we are using some process, and we are intervening something into the clinical research and checking how the person is reacting to that process and how the process is showing its effect on the person, which is interventional. You are intervening something to the participants and into the research. So we can see an example also here. Okay, so how the research is working, okay, how the therapist is going to work, so how the health and economic combinedly doing. Okay, so what is a patient, how he is experiencing to the drug and how the drug is acting on the person. So you are involving all this. You are developing a process, or you are developing a drug and checking how it has been acting, which is an interventional. Whereas observational, so observational means you're not involving anything. You're just observing to the situation how the patient is reacting. You're not involving any process. You're not involving any drug. You're not involving anything. You're just observing the situation to the situation, how this disease is reacting onto the human beings, or the drug is reacting on the human beings, or naturally, if some process is happening, what is happening in this particular situation. You're just observing and calculating the outputs, and you're presenting them. Okay. So now whatever the research designs and the research that we are doing, all them were the interventional research only. Rarely we are doing an observational study, but observational research is very important. So if you perform an observational research study perfectly, then only you can intervene something and you can get a best output. If you don't observe anything, and if you don't understand the present situation, what is happening, let us see, take the COVID only. So if you don't know, like, this COVID is a pandemic, and when the COVID is affecting to the patient, there are different incubation periods. It is showing its effect on children in one way, in women in other way, in the younger people in other way, in an elder people another way. If you're not observing that, we cannot introduce a vaccine, and we can't fix its different doses and give it to the human being. So observational study is very important. If you do observational study perfectly, then our interventional study will be very easier. And always the interventional study is partially or fully dependent on the observational clinical study. Okay, so this is the basic thing that we need to learn. And whereas coming to the interventional study, they are always a controllable experiments. Okay, so you can control. You can take a group of people, and that group of people will be in your hand. Okay, so how much population? For example, if we are going for a phase 1 clinical trial, you can take less than 100 population, healthy individual. So if you're taking 100, or you're taking a 20, or you're taking a 50 number of participants, it's your wish. So always we can control an interventional study. But whereas observational study, it is not under your control, because you are not intervening anything. We are just observing. So they are not in our control. Okay. So every participation, allocation, everything will be our control only. We can focus on every single part, what we wanted to do, and we can pick out the output that we wanted to do. But whereas in the observational study, you're just simply observing, and you're noting down all the changes and giving the report. So whereas coming to the WHO International Clinical Trial Registry platform, it is stating that intervention means whatever it might be a drug, it might be a cell, or it might be a biological product, it might be a surgical procedure, that means surgery, or it might be a radiological procedure, it might be a medical device, or any behavioral treatment, okay, or any care, or any preventive care, or any treatment care. So if you are involving something, that comes under interventional study only. Okay, don't think interventional study means if you are involving any drug only, that comes into an interventional study. If you are intervening in between through any of the procedures which we have learned so far, that comes under interventional study. So why is that so important to define between interventional and an observational study? Means the process of dealing with observational clinical research and their documentation is completely different. and the process that we are conducting the interventional study and preparing the documentation is completely different. Okay, so first we need to identify what kind of clinical research it is. Yes, it's a clinical research because we are involving human being, but what kind of it is? Is it a observational or is it a interventional? So then we have to follow the procedures for that, and we have to conduct the clinical trial reports and different regulatory documents. Okay, so the next part is there is another terminology that you need to understand. One is single center study and the other one is multi center study. So I hope you know the definition and the difference between the single center study and the multi center study. So anyone, you can give me the answer. What is single center study and what is multi center study? Yes? Don't know the answer? Okay, fine. So, single center study. See, if you want to perform a clinical trial in Pune, okay, you got a big place, equipment, and personnel to do the clinical trial and everything at one single place of Pune only. So, there only you're recruiting all the people and everyone coming there, and you're doing a clinical trial there itself. So that is called as a single center study. Okay, there only you're doing the entire work. But whereas coming to the multi-center study, because of the cost or because of the transportation inavailability, or because of economical issues or financial issues, we can't recruit all the people at that place only. The place is not sufficient or something. There might be different problems. So what we'll do is we'll divide this particular group of 1,000 people and 200 to 300 staff and everyone into different places. Wherever we had a feasibility, we'll be distributing them to the small clinical trial centers, which will be handed over by only one group of people or one main center. So all this multiple clinical trial centers were working under single motto only. Because of the type, because of the scale of the research that we are undertaking, we can't do that at one single place. We are distributing them to the small clinical trial centers, but everyone is working on the same thing. So that particular group of institutions or group of clinical research centers which was working under same thing is called as multi-center study. So now and all, mostly multi-center studies only we are going to see, because we know like getting the permission for such a vast area, or everyone coming to that place only and they need to reside there, so we have to get food, water, drainage. Okay, so every facility there only, it's really tough. So wherever there is a feasibility, we are opening a clinical trial center and we are performing the clinical trials, which we call it as a multi-center study. And moving on to the next slide. So how this clinical research has been different from the standard care. So this clinical research and this standard care means, like, if you're going to a hospital, if you're visiting a hospital, okay, and a group of individuals were there, and we know they'll be telling their symptoms. Okay, they'll be telling like, so these are the, from this past 5 days I am suffering from this kind of illness, and the doctor will be diagnosing that, and they'll be giving a routine care or routine drug to the person, which is called as a standard care, which you're going to see in all the clinics, physicians or the doctors. Whereas coming to the clinical research means this routine care will not be done. So always we'll be doing in a trial and error process, and not always will be taking a patients. In the phase 1, we need in healthy individuals. In the phase 2, we are going to check it on a individuals who are having that particular target drug. Okay. In third phase, we are going to give it to the different individuals and we are going to compare. And in the fourth, it is reaching into the market. So you're always doing a trial and error. and you're comparing the results and you're trying to improve the better drug or cost effective drug or safer drug or an efficient drug to the already existing process. Okay, so we are always intervening something and we are doing a comparative standards and we are trying to develop a new drug. So when you're doing this particular process of trying to get a permission for the clinical trial or trying to develop a drug and marketing the drug, you need to submit different documentation and we need to produce the data to the normal individuals and also to the experts. So this type of documentation writing, which is related to the medical and healthcare, is completely a direct job of medical writer. So if you're doing a documentation work, if you're writing a documents which were related to the medicine and healthcare, so that particular documentation writing is called as a medical writing. So it's very important. If you don't know anything regarding the medical and healthcare, and if you don't know anything about the clinical research, and if you don't know anything about the medical terminology and the concepts and the research data, how you're going to prepare the documents and how you're going to convert that tough documents into a simpler way. So we should have a proper basics on all this, on the clinical research, on medicine, on healthcare, on drugs, on adverse drug reactions, on phases of the clinical trial, on drug development process, because medical writing is not a narrow thing, it's a vast thing that we are going to learn in the next slides. So this particular study designs. Okay, so what is studies design? So how you're going to perform the clinical research? Okay, yes, you're involving human beings. Yes, you're doing an experimentation, but doing experimentation is different. Okay, so there are different types of study designs. Okay, so the most commonly used study designs were cohort study, case control study, cross-sectional study, case reports, and clinical trials. So these are the different methods that we are going to perform the experiments under the clinical research. So how we are using the study design? There are a lot more study design. How we are going to pick the study design? So based on the research question, okay, so based on what you're going to investigate, you're always choosing the study design. So moving on to the first study design, that is a cohort study. Okay, so it's very, very simple. Don't get confused. It's very, very simple. Cohort means batches. So here you can see there is a batch of almost 40 students. Okay, so this is a batch for this 1 week of masterclass, and your one batch. After your batch was done, we'll be getting few more new students and we'll be arranging a new batch for that new student. So after that, we'll go with the other batch. So that batches is called as cohort study. You will check for this batch, you will collect the data, and again you will take another batch and you will be doing the test and you will be getting the data. And in the third batch, you will take another batch. Okay, and you batch, you all the 40 people, your batch is the one who is having the common teacher for the medical writing module, common teacher for the clinical research, common teacher for the regulatory affairs, common teacher for the pharmacovigilance or data management, right? You all people have to join at 11 and you have to stay here for 12:30 and you have to listen to the lecture, and you do have the same coordinator, you do have the same link. So your batch is having a common points, all these common points. So that is how the cohort study also work. So we'll take one batch. That batch will be having a same disease or same exposure of the drug or same lifestyle. Okay. And we'll be giving a treatment to them. Okay. And we'll check what are the outcomes, how the person, how this entire batch is reacting to the treatment, and what are the possible outcomes. To person A, what is the outcome? To person B, what is the outcome? To person C, what is the outcome? So for a certain period of time, if this cohort study is for 1 month, for all that batch, that is for 1 month only. And if they are taking a drug called ABC, they'll be taking all the people they were taking the ABC drug only. The same food will be given, the same treatment will be given, and they'll be checking the outcomes. So this cohort study, whatever the cohort study that we are taking, if you want to get a finest details of the experiments, it takes some years to complete. Okay. And it is bit expensive also. For example, there are some examples that who has done a cohort study and got a beautiful answers. So in 2006, they have done an observational cohort study on a HIV infected African children by a scientist called Lawfer and his team. Okay, they selected a people in Africa who has HIV infected, and they done a observational cohort study in 2006. Whereas in 2010, there is another concept like what is primary healthcare services routine, okay, and how they were contributing in reducing the mortality in the infants in developing countries. Okay, so what is the common motto there? They are completely focusing on the primary healthcare services in all the developing countries, and that too they are focusing only on the infants, and how those primary healthcare services were trying to reduce that mortality. So this type of selecting the batches, okay, who are under the same treatment or same lifestyle or same treatment or same disease is called as a cohort study, and it is bit expensive and it takes some years to complete. If there is only common point in a group of people, then you're going to evaluate anything, then you will be going for the cohort study, but it is bit expensive. Okay.
For more details, connect us on given details on screen. And don't forget to follow us on our social media. Thank you.